and welcome back to Genesis Designs and Watercraft, and here we are with part 10, the final part of Foxy Killer, and this will be quite a short one. I'm not going to go into massive detail about what's gone on with this. There are 9 other videos to watch for all of that, plus the Facebook page. So just a quick kind of rundown of what was done here, what I used, how, why, etc. Anyway, let's start off then. The kit itself, Eduard's 1/48 scale limited edition Desert Babes, which is based on the Revell kit. As we know, this is the new tool Revell kit released several years ago now, but it's quite a modern kit. So being an Eduard special edition, that comes with a great big decal sheet, loads of options, some photo etch and resin seats, and it's fair to say that I actually used almost none of the Eduard supplied etch or resin. I ended up supplementing it with other things, but obviously I used the decals. You can't buy the kit anymore anyway unless you get one second hand, but bearing what I just said in mind, really the only good reason for buying that over just getting a standard kit and a load of different detail parts is the decal sheet, if that's what you want. So what did I do with it? I have added some airs things, or air res if you prefer, but definitely not airies. Cockpit set. I'll just pop the canopy off. It's just resting in place. It's quite a nice sort of slide on fit. Put you over here out the way. So airs cockpit set. So that's a complete new tub, new instrument panels, including this central one with all the boxes on it, and resin seats. I did end up using the airs seats. I wasn't sure that I would because I had some other ones with moulded in belts, but I ended up using the airs ones and I made my own belts. Then on top of that, exhaust cans. Those are also airs parts, and it's fair to say the kit parts here aren't actually that bad, but the airs parts are a substantial improvement nonetheless, although they do make fitting the thrust reverser buckets even more fun than they otherwise would be. There's a nice look at those. And then the cockpit itself, I'm aware that the lighting's not ideal, but you can see in there quite nicely. So the airs also supplied some extensions to the cockpit sills. I then added seal detail to that myself. And underneath, there's not many places you can hold this thing now. Flip them over and we've got airs wheel bays, which weren't all that much trouble to fit and are an absolutely massive improvement over standard. I mean, you can't really emphasize that enough. Okay, so that's those parts. Then we've got Brassin, some extra Brassin parts. So as I said, the kit included Brassin seats, which I did not end up using. I did, however, use Brassin wheels, which are lovely. Brassin wheels are always lovely, and these are no exception. They're also very good value, I think, compared to most resin wheels. They do tend to fit the kit they're designed for as well. Laser guided bombs, so the paveways, those are Brassin items too. Clearly they don't come in the kit. Those are absolutely delightful as well. They come with either the covered caps, which are fitted here, or you can have them with exposed seeker heads. And actually the aim 9s, the sidewinders, which you can just see peeping out inside the tank there. Those are also Brassin items and do include the seeker head covers as well. Master brass parts, pitot and angle of attack vanes, which do stick into your fingers if you hold the model just there. Master parts are magnificent. How they turn brass in that with that finesse, I really don't know, but they are absolutely beautiful. They're a no-brainer for any model that you can put a master pitot on. You just should. They're around about £3 or so. They're just well worth it. The removed before flight tags, which you can see dotted around on the weapons and hanging out of the undercarriage bays, those are made from lead foil. Made them myself, go me. And I used Daco Productions decals actually for the ones that have got stripes and writing on. Daco Productions do a large remove before flight tag decal sheets in all the scales, and they're quite a decent investment actually. Lastly, for aftermarket parts, flying start models, 3D printed Radome. This is a much better shape than the kit part, and here is where we get into the sort of the Genesis modifications and additions, because even though the Radome was better than the kit one, the kit as it comes, the Radome kind of joins in the wrong place and the shapes are all weird, so that still had to be reshaped and filled and contoured to better match the original. It ends up with a sort of a double chin effect if you're not careful. Not the fault of the Radome, it's just a direct replacement for the kit part, but as I say, the joint between the kit Radome and the nose is kind of, roughly speaking, about here, so the sort of change in the cross section down the bottom here is too far forward basically on the kit. Anyway, sorted that out. So yeah, that's the nose modifications, just to correct that sort of change of shape that you get on the Tornado just ahead of the cannons. It's in the wrong place as it comes, and I sorted that out with filler basically. The fin, the kit again, the shape of this sort of ducting area is odd, a little bit fat and not very nice. That was all carved and sanded to shape and a bit of filler added to get that looking a bit better. Wing sweep, so this is a funny one, because look at documentation, they'll tell you the minimum wing sweep on the Tornado is 25 degrees or thereabouts. Problem being that on the real thing, the wing sweep isn't measured by any normal method. It's not like you can take an angle off the centre line and get your sort of wing sweep. It's done at the actuator, so it isn't directly relatable. And the kit, anyway, the kit as it comes, the wings are swept too far back at fully forward, so I did some modifications to enable the wings to come forward properly. There have been some knock-on effects because I've done that. For example, the inner area of the flap here is actually it looks a bit wrong because it's all slightly in a different place, and I had to shorten the slat and also the aperture for it as well. So when you do things like that, there's often little knock-on effects that you don't initially think about, but that all had to be done. The flaps themselves were reworked quite significantly. They're a bit flat and plank-like as they come, and also have horrible joints all over the place, so that took a lot of effort with super glue and talc filler to get them sorted out. The weapons, back to the weapons, the Boz and the Sky Shadow pods I reworked myself. You can buy Brassin, there we go, Brassin, Boz and Sky Shadow pods, as you'd expect, because when they do these limited editions, they quite often do a selection of other parts to go with the same kit that you don't get in it, and of course the pods are one of them. But by the time I realised that, I'd already done a lot of work, and I decided just to stick with it and use my reworked ones. APU outlet under there. There he is, that little square hole you can see. That was boxed in properly, and a little representation of the exhaust has been added in there. You can't see it, but it now doesn't just look like a hole, which is how it would have looked if I had left it alone. And on the same, in the same vein, the little outlet just ahead of the wheel well there was reshaped to better match the original as well. I remade the wing seals out of Tamiya epoxy putty. Kit ones are basically just flat with some lines scribed on them. Don't look very good. What are the canopy and windscreen? So I made a new miniature detonation cord assembly for the canopy out of wire, so that is both three-dimensional and separate from the canopy now, which is as it should be. And I made some framing and internal stuff for the main canopy and also for the windscreen, and then painted it from the inside, so the black painted internal areas are painted from the inside, which adds a sort of a depth and level of realism to the thing that you don't get if you paint it from the outside. And the final, just quick one, I don't know if you can see the little dots along the bottom of the engine panels there. They were represented as scribe detail on the kit, most of them. I just drilled them out and added a little bit of glazing fluid at the end, because those are little sight glasses for various level indications on the engines. There's lots of other little bits and pieces, and of course there were multiple trials and tribulations with the fit and the finish of the kit in general as I went through it, all of which is pretty much covered in the other 9 videos. It's been a lot of work. Finish wise then, I painted the whole model in wraparound camouflage first, and then I added desert sand and I chipped the desert sand to reveal the previously applied camouflage. Arguably, I went to a lot of effort for no good reason doing that. I know that, and I knew it at the time, but I wanted to do it, so I did. And that's that. The desert pink is this. I made it myself. It's based on XF59 desert yellow. It has quite a lot of white added and a touch of red and a touch of yellow, and therein lies one of my main disappointments with the finish of this thing. The colour, when I originally applied it, just looked, to my eyes, just looked really spot on, but the main thing is it changed with the light in the way that the real paint does, which I really liked. And for whatever reason, when I added some flat varnish, which is VMS incidentally, which is far and away the best matte varnish I've found yet, it just took away that slight little chameleon aspect of the colour, just a touch. It's still there a bit, but it's just kind of washed it out and made it look a bit insipid. Slight disappointment, but we live and learn. I mean, I was always going to have to put some gloss on it for various reasons, so I was always going to have to matte it, and unfortunately that's the effect it's had. It does still look decent, but it's just lost that slight sort of colour changing aspect that it originally had. Weathering wise, on top of the desert sand, I applied in a slightly patchy manner. There's no actual sort of explicit fading or shading applied to the paintwork itself, but then it's been weathered using oil brushes and washes made from oil brushes basically throughout, and I've used that to add this kind of, and I'm aware the light's reflecting in such a way that you can't really see it at the minute, but foot traffic on the top of the aircraft. It's very noticeable in photographs of these things because the paint was so dull. Every little bit of footprint shows up really, really well, and that's what most of the weathering is. There's a few areas where I've deliberately added a little bit of slightly pale oil paint to put a slight difference in there, and I've also done a few touch-ups on top of the varnish to just give a bit of variation. The weathering in itself is based on various photographs of aircraft at the time. Almost all the photos I could find of Foxy herself were post-conflict, so they're not necessarily accurate, obviously. So this is a mixture of all the pictures I could find. So this tank bay leak, this tank bay lid leak, for example, is very evident on a photo I found, so I added it. The one thing that is very factual though, and it's quite a nice story, so I will relate it. Under here, see all this oil. So one of the photos I did find of Foxy at an air show, I think it was Riyadh, or the Tattoo as it was then. Sorry, care required. There's all this greasy stuff on the BOS pod, and it confused me because the BOS pod is just it's a countermeasures pod. It's flares and chaff, so there's no reason whatsoever why it would ever look greasy or get greasy, and yet there it was. So I contacted my friend, and a shout out to Nick Brown, used to serve on Tornadoes up until they left service, and has been a great help to me for silly little details throughout the build. So I sent him the picture and said, what's going on here? Why has the BOS pod got grease all over it? And he agreed with me that it looked like grease, and he said, I'll look into it, leave it with me. He then contacted people within his network of ex-Tornado mechanics, and someone somewhere had a vague recollection, in fact, that Foxy had a spoiler actuator leak, and that's where all the oil had come from. It was coming out of the spoiler, tracking along the underside of the wing, and then dripping down onto the BOS pod, and hence the nasty, greasy, oily looking mess. So this is what I've replicated here. It emanates from sort of this area, tracks along, and then drips down onto the pod, leaving it significantly besmirched. So that was a nice little story, and I really love being able to put little details like that into builds that are sort of factually correct. So yeah, that's a really nice little thing I'm very happy with. And there you have it. That's the finished model. I'm astonished, frankly, that I managed to take so long about this. When I initially agreed to do this build, this is a commission build, I figured it might take me, 4 weeks or so. It actually took just over a year. I mean, but that's elapsed time. It didn't literally take a year, obviously, but it probably did literally take 4 months of that year. Huge amount of effort. Mostly because the kit itself is quite lukewarm, if I'm brutally honest. It's a shame because clearly, as you can see, the look and the sit and the feel of the Tornado is captured quite well by this kit. Much better certainly than pretty much any previous 48 scale kit, I think. But it's just not the greatest kit to build. There are some significant inaccuracies, as I said, with the nose and the wing sweep and the base of the fin. If you don't fix those, it doesn't look right. You can't really fit the flaps and slats in the up position very well, so you can't, really just go, oh, I'll just have the wings swept. There's details. Pretty basic, honestly, as it comes. It's reasonable, but it's certainly nothing to write home about. And the fit's not great. If you've looked at the rest of the videos in the series, you'll have seen the fairly considerable amount of effort that went into trying to make the fit as good as possible, and then still ending up with 2mm wide gaps around the back end when it came to it. So it's not the best, but flip side, it's quite cheap, I suppose, and at least it's available, and if the effort is put in, the result is a very nice Tornado model. I can't deny that, but I can't see myself building another one anytime soon, which is a shame because I do like the Tornado. Anyhow, so there we go, that's it. 10 instalments of Foxy killing. She's done. We'll move on to the next thing, which, for reference's sake, within the next week or so after you see this video, will be a video build of the Armour Hobby P51B, which I do not expect to take 1 year or 10 instalments to complete, so it should be a bit quicker and a bit easier for everybody. But I'd like to thank everybody for following along, watching it, enjoying it, commenting on it. Some people helped me out with weapons load information, lots of really nice comments along the way. I'm really pleased so many of you obviously have enjoyed it, and it has been helpful to people too. So thank you for all of that. Thanks again to Nick Brown for his help, which has been absolutely invaluable, and to Vince of Models for Sale, who I got the kit from in the first place. And Foxy will be winging her way to her forever home in a few weeks' time, and so it only remains for me to say, look after yourselves, look after each other, and Foxy out.